Guys, this is Rob from the Nomadic, and we're creating madness with madness creation. Just hope you all take good care of yourselves during this pandemic and those around you, and we'll get through it together. Stay strong.
I'll be a shoulder you can cry on tonight. Lady, I'll be someone who can make it all seem right.
Podcast. This is Maddie. How are you? Hopefully you guys are doing amazing and all that good stuff. And I have an interview with Robert Gaylerd, aka the Nomadic, who joined us on the 30th episode of the Madness of Creation podcast. And this was such an enlightening conversation with basically a dude that was jack of all trades and master of pretty much everything. And he is a world traveler. He works for the United Nations, and he also is a frontman of an indie rock band called the Nomadic. And in this podcast, you will learn about his work for the United Nations and various humanitarian and peacekeeping missions. And he's traveled to places such as Kenya, Somalia, Sudan, Afghanistan, Indonesia, Israel, and Palestine. And he's also done some world traveling to countries like Myanmar, Singapore, and the Solomon Islands. And recently, the Nomadic released a single entitled Skater Park, which he also talked about. He also goes into detail about just not only the work that he does, but the music that he makes, but he is also a huge mental health advocate. And he also sent us some t-shirts as well, and we will be planning some type of special giveaway to commemorate the Nomadic. And just remember that today, without getting too political, justice was served today. Derek Chauvin was found guilty for the murder of George Floyd. He was found guilty on 3 counts, and we acknowledge that there's work still left to be done. While we see this as a major justice, just like Vice President Kamala Harris says. We acknowledge that that work still needs to be done in order to promote a more equal society and a more perfect society. And you can find this podcast on Spotify, SoundCloud, Spreaker, JioSaavn, iHeartRadio, YouTube, and Google Podcasts. And also find us at madnessofcreation.com. And you can find us on Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram at Madness of Creation, and on Twitter at MTC Madness. Without further delay, here's our conversation with Australian guitarist and singer-songwriter Robert Gaylerd of the Nomadic. Take it away, Robert. Welcome to the Madness Creation Podcast, where self-care and music merge. This is Maddie. How are you? And here I have with me is the Nomadic, who is based out of Australia and now New York. So first question I have for the Nomadic is, do you like being called the Nomadic, or?
Well, my personal name is Rob Gaylerd.
Okay, so I'll call you Rob then.
You can call me Rob, but I think the Nomadic, I like it in the sense that I think it's a big part of my story and who I am, and obviously now with the music. So yeah, it would be a bit weird if someone sort of said, "Oh, what's the Nomadic ordering, for dinner?" But I don't mind it. But I'll definitely respond slightly quicker to Rob than Nomadic on the street, but only slightly quicker.
Yeah, definitely. And so you're from Australia and you're based in New York. What was that change like going from Australia all the way to New York? How was that change for you?
Cool. Yeah, great question. I mean, culturally, the difference between Australia and the US, I wouldn't say is that big. I mean, they're quite similar countries in many ways. So that wouldn't be that hard of an adjustment. My trajectory was more working all around the world, actually. So I worked in, Kenya and Somalia and Sudan. I worked in Afghanistan. I worked in Indonesia. I worked in Israel, Palestine. So previous to New York, I was living in Tel Aviv, actually, in Israel. So, the change wasn't Australia to New York. It was kind of Tel Aviv to New York. So, I wouldn't say it was a huge adjustment. I mean, I fell in love with New York almost straight away. There's just so much to love about the city. So and I had a lot of friends here, so it was a pretty easy move, I would say.
Oh, absolutely. And you mentioned that you lived in Tel Aviv and you worked in Israel, Palestine, all these places. What inspired the work that you did, and what type of work did you do?
Sure, yeah. Well, I've always been really passionate about, doing things for other people and trying to make, sounds a bit of a cliche, but, it's true, trying to make the world a better place, supporting minorities, supporting people who were not as fortunate as myself. And so that's really where it started. And I studied kind of these kind of issues around international development. And it's a mixture of the work I've done, more kind of humanitarian, like responding to a humanitarian situation. And there's been jobs that I've done that are more on the development side, which is actually kind of working in government ministries in Afghanistan. I worked in the Ministry of Interior, I worked in the Ministry of Agriculture, I worked in the Ministry of Interior in Palestine, to try to strengthen the government's response in terms of providing services to its citizens. So, a whole range of jobs, but definitely extremely interesting. And I tried to pick up some of the languages while I was there and really meet some local people and get to know their culture. And I wouldn't have swapped that experience for anything.
Yeah, how many languages can you speak? I'm curious now.
I can speak pretty decent. I can get by in English, obviously, although I'm still practicing. Spanish, Arabic, and at the time when I was in Afghanistan, 2009, 2011, I was pretty good at Dari, which is pretty much the same as Farsi, what they speak in Iran. So, but if I had to speak to someone today, I would say French, Spanish, Arabic. I could get by. Dari might need a bit of practice. Yeah.
Wow, that's pretty impressive. So, like, how do you do it? Like, learn all these languages? Like, I took 2 years of Spanish, and I know how to count to 10, and I know like a random word here and there. And I knew enough Japanese to get around, like just to be polite, in that culture, because I lived in Japan for a summer in 2004. So how did you train yourself to learn all these languages? And do you sometimes incorporate the languages that you learn, into your music?
Yeah, excellent question. Well, I think maybe having a bit of a musical ear helps. So I'm not great at sort of sitting down with a book on grammar and kind of, doing 4 hours a day and learning past and future and, grammar stuff. But what I'm quite good at is just going out on the street and sort of picking it up and trying and failing and trying again, failing again, and gradually getting better. And once you get to a certain level with languages, I kind of cheat a little bit. I start watching Netflix shows with English subtitles. And then once you get in the story, once you sort of become a little bit part of the culture, whether you're in the country and talking to people or even, sad to say nowadays, on Netflix watching shows, once you get into the story and the culture, it just gathers a bit of a momentum. I haven't really written anything yet in another language, but I've often thought that would sort of potentially be the next frontier for me because, I think, the NOMADIC, if I could write songs in other languages, that would be fantastic. So you're right, that could be the next project. It's always a bit tricky though, right? Because people get used to a certain style and you want to alter that a little bit, but then, suddenly you're singing in a completely different language. It's a risky move, but I think it would be worth a try. I've rapped in some of my songs, so I do listen to drifting. So I thought that was a huge risk at the time. And the great thing as an artist is just to sort of try things and see what works and have fun with it.
Oh, definitely. And do you feel like sometimes you bring like the influences from other cultures into your music too? Like, for example, maybe like more of a Middle Eastern vibe or Central Asian vibe, like when you were in Iran and Afghanistan and Israel?
Yeah, I think more at the moment, more the lyrics and the stories. So
sure.
The song that I've written, that will probably be on a future album, not the next one, but called Hearts and Minds, which is quite a rocky sort of song. There's another one called The Absolution, and those are kind of about some of the themes that I came across in the field in Afghanistan, and some of the topics that I witnessed and really fed into some of the lyrics, I think. So probably more lyrically, I would say, than musically at this point. But I would be definitely open, especially after COVID. I can't wait to sort of don't be a bit nomadic again and maybe get some experiences in different parts of the world.
Mm-hmm.
the best of the best have done it, right? There's
Right.
Beatles in India, and not that I'm comparing myself to the Beatles, but it does seem a really cool thing to do. So, but I guess I'm not the only person in the world who's dying to travel at the moment.
Oh, you're telling me. I feel like I've been on lockdown for like a year. Like I literally have, besides going to work and getting essentials and going to my folks' place, I really haven't gone anywhere. So, like, what are some? I'm kind of curious. What are some like misconceptions like American media and American culture has about the Afghani culture and like the Israeli culture that you have found when you've dealt with the people in Afghanistan and Israel?
Interesting question. Yeah, so I was in Somalia, the Sudan, Afghanistan, Indonesia, and I was in Israel and Palestine actually. So I think to answer your question, if I take say Afghanistan, Israel, and Palestine, so for the Afghans, so the people are the Afghans, and the currency actually is Afghani. So that's one misconception. People refer to the people as it's actually Afghans, and then the currency, the money is Afghani. So that's
so the people are Afghan and the currency is Afghani.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, I learned something new today. Teacher got taught.
I learned that on my very first day in Kabul. So it's a common misconception. I think generally the way I'd answer your question is that there's probably been a lot of stereotypes and misconceptions about the Middle East in the last maybe 20 or so years, probably since 9/11, maybe going back even further. I mean, the vast majority of people I came across, and I was lucky to have a lot of friends in Afghanistan and Israel and in Palestine. I think the vast majority of people just want what you and I want. They want shelter over their head. They want their kids to be educated. They want a good job. They want to have options to a sort of a full and fulfilling life. And very often in the poor conditions that parts of Afghanistan are in, a full and flourishing, fulfilling life is probably, quite a long way down the line. But that's, we all kind of want the same kind of package of things. So, very often you get the stereotype of, the political violence or terrorism and people think that, there's bombs going off all the time and there's like gunfights. That wasn't my experience. I mean, that did happen for sure. But I had periods where I would go out with Afghan friends to restaurants and cafes, and you have to be very careful with the risk and really manage it. But I think maybe the misconception is that there's only bad news going on there, and in fact there's a lot of really cool, interesting, fun stuff, and people are getting on with their lives, and most people tend to want exactly what you and I want, really, in life.
Yeah, it's kind of unfortunate, without getting too political, it's kind of unfortunate that the powers that be want all this power and resources, whereas 99% of the rest of the world just want to provide for their families, as you said, want jobs and stuff like that. So did you have to take extra like security measures and stuff in order to do this work, like for the United Nations, or like how did that work? I mean, you probably can't reveal too much because of the sensitivity of the situation, but
no, I can talk pretty freely about it. I'm not.
Okay. I wasn't sure if it was like not a top secret thing, but like where you had to have like security clearance or anything like that. So
no, that's more with if you work with the US, like State Department or USAID, they often require quite high levels of security clearance. I mean, in the UN, we have to do various security courses to go to these countries. We have obviously a security team on the ground. We have armored vehicles. And then, to be quite honest, it's a little bit down to your common sense. You need to know, there's a lot of suicide attacks that happen between 8 and 9 a.m., for example, when people are on their way to work. So they tell you to kind of like vary your time you go to work, maybe work from home sometimes. And then I relied on just having a lot of really good Afghan friends who would kind of give me the lowdown of what was going on. So that's sort of how I tried to mitigate the risk. But you can't totally get rid of it. It is an active war zone. So for sure, in all these countries, bad things can happen. But to be quite honest with you, there's parts of New York and there's parts of DC and
Oh,
other parts
sure.
of the US, where you have to be careful as well. So it's just a matter of knowing the risk and trying to mitigate the risk, I would say.
Yeah, definitely. And I would agree with that. And so like how has we talk about mental health as well. And naturally we'll get into your music too. How has the pandemic like affected like your songwriting for the Nomadic? Have you guys been able to come together or to write songs, or are you like sending files over? How is that working? Like in terms of your music?
Yeah, it's pretty much me who writes the songs for the Nomadic. So I think it's been. I mean, I'd always sort of had this vision, to be honest, of we played live a lot, 17, 18, 19, and then I wanted to kind of just release music. So in that sense, COVID didn't change my plan too much in terms of releasing singles, and I've been able to, yeah, I think just write a lot, like have that extra time, and obviously some interesting themes coming up in terms of the general socioeconomic environment, right? With COVID and the Black Lives Matter protests last year, and the election, and lots of interesting things going on that I've tried to sort of capture a little bit in my writing. So yeah, I'd be interested to. Hopefully, people will see a growth in the way I'm writing songs as into the next album and the one following that.
Yeah, definitely. And did you take part in any of the protests, like when there was the civil unrest going on last year, or did you just kind of sit back and observe? What role did you play?
Sure. Okay, this is getting political then.
Okay.
No, it's fine. No, I'm very happy. I'm very happy to answer honestly and give my opinion because I work with the UN.
Sure.
We're basically not really allowed to take part in any protests. So yeah, I mean, I just have to be a little bit careful about that, no matter what my own personal opinion is and the different causes that I might support. I think public protests are kind of are difficult when you're working with the UN. So I didn't participate in any of the protests last year. No.
Okay. Yeah, and I figured as such with you working in the UN, you kind of had to I don't want to say take a back seat, but you had to kind of lay low from it, and stuff like that. So you recently released a single from your upcoming album Beyond Blue called Skater Park, and just kind of a question for you. What was that song inspired by, and just what was the most challenging, rewarding aspect of any song that you create, especially Skater Park?
Cool. Yeah. Well, that was an interesting one because normally I write pretty much by myself, but we were on a family holiday in Australia in December 2018. And I was rooming with my then, I think 15 or 16-year-old nephew Guy, and he said, "Hey, Uncle Rob, why don't we write a song together?" So I was a bit skeptical. I thought, well, normally I write my own songs, but we'll just treat it as a jam session. And we started like just sort of playing and, coming up with lyrics and yeah, we just, within about an hour, we'd written this song Skater Park. So it was really cool. I mean, the song itself is about like reminiscence and nostalgia and, thinking back to a time when maybe life was a bit more innocent. Maybe you had a good friend or a lover, girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever, who you were very close to, and then you kind of fall out of touch with. And mostly when I hear it, it's about reminiscence and nostalgia, I would say. So it was just cool that I kind of wrote it with my nephew, which was just pretty cool. And then what was your other question? The most challenging part?
Oh yeah, what was the most challenging? Like whether it's this song or in general, what is the most challenging thing for yourself, and what is the most rewarding aspect for yourself when it comes to you writing music? I mean, whether it's this song or any of your songs that you've written.
Maybe it's a little bit of the same answer. I mean, sometimes it's challenging when you have a song and you hear it a certain way, and then you work with other people, or the producer or something, or even my nephew in this case, and you're so fixated on certain things, and then you have to keep an open mind because other people will come in with different ideas that can make it like even better. So sometimes I find that challenging. It's like, no, I don't want to cut that bit. No, I don't want to sing there. I want to pause, or vice versa. But I try to just keep a really open mind and realized that, these are kind of my babies, but they're not, in a way, the songs, like they belong to the world. So I have to kind of give them air and space to grow in whichever way they will. So I try to just keep an open mind in terms of people I collaborate with, and usually I think that leads to a better result.
Absolutely. And have you done any like live streams or anything like that since the pandemic, or like an Instagram live or anything like that?
I did, I think, 1 or 2 kind of Zoom concerts for, select kind of nomadic fans, but I'm actually going to start up probably around late March, the 27th, like a regular Saturday live stream show, and, play some nomadic songs, play some covers, maybe do some interviews. So I am going to set that up. As a matter of fact, I think all my equipment is arriving like today or tomorrow or something. So
perfect timing.
So I'll invite you. I'm going to have fun, setting it all up. And it's good timing because I just did a session yesterday and also last week, Tuesday, Wednesday, where I recorded 23 songs, like about half originals and about half covers. Like videoed themselves up on YouTube. So it's a good time because I have been, rehearsing my repertoire.
Absolutely. And are there any favorite cover song that you play?
I've always loved Oasis, so
Oh man,
Look Back in Anger, Wonderwall. I like Coldplay, Yellow, Lost. I'm sort of learning at the moment John Mayer, the finger picking version of Free Falling, which I think is really cool that he does.
Wow.
And what else? Bruce Springsteen. I sometimes play I'm on Fire. Bruce Springsteen. And there's a couple of others, but those would be the main ones.
Absolutely. And what any other surprises that you're gonna have for, it wouldn't be a surprise though, but any other surprises that you're gonna have for your fans in terms of this, or
the live stream?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, I think I'm just playing around with it at the moment, the theme of the nomadic life. So I was thinking, much like this podcast, to sort of have an element of music. So have, 30, 40, 45 minutes music, and then maybe bring in an interview. So someone who's maybe had a nomadic life and worked with UN or, the US government, or
that's really interesting.
Bring them in and interview them in a podcast style about their career. So that's the idea that I probably had, and then take requests from people if there's any songs they want me to learn and play. And I thought of doing another one, so that's on Saturday. Sunday I thought, because I know I have a lot of friends who have parents who's struggling at the moment with kids and homeschooling. So I thought maybe to do a kind of kids concert just with fun kind of kids songs, The Lion Sleeps Tonight, that sort of thing, which my little my cousin's little daughter is obsessed with that song. And I thought that could be nice to do like a kids concert, but let's see. I don't want to overextend myself, but
sure.
But, yeah, those are the ideas that I have, just to sort of try and keep people going a little bit during the pandemic.
Oh, definitely. And if you could bring on any guest that lives a nomadic life or any government official, you can only pick one. Who would you pick?
Ooh, wow. That's a very good question. I can pick anyone, right?
Yeah. Whether they're alive or dead. Or if you want to pick somebody that's just alive right now, to narrow it down a little bit, we can do it that way too.
Sure. Well, let me stay loyal to the UN and pick someone that you may not have heard of, but there's a very there's a lot of great UN leaders, but there's one guy called Jamie McGoldrick, who is the head of the UN in Yemen. And I heard him speak recently, and it was just so amazing to hear the experience of trying to coordinate the humanitarian response in Yemen. So I'd probably go for someone like that. I mean, obviously you've got the major political figures, secretaries of state, and ex-presidents. Maybe if I could get them, I'll ask them as well. But to the UN, I might start with some of the senior UN leaders who've coordinated like humanitarian response on the ground. I think people would find that really interesting.
Oh, that's awesome. And what was the most, from a mental health standpoint, what's the most rewarding thing that you get out for yourself in terms of helping coordinate these humanitarian efforts and stuff like that? Like, to me, it's got to be pretty self-gratifying, and what mental health aspect does that help with you for that?
Yeah, I think it helps to know that you're doing things for other people, and that hopefully the projects we run are having an impact on people's lives on the ground. They sometimes, like the teams on the ground, make videos, for example, of when like a new water system has been constructed and people are using it, and I mean that's pretty cool to see.
Oh yeah,
that kind of thing. So yeah, just trying to, mental health wise, just trying to keep in mind other people, and what they're going through and how you're helping them, for sure helps with your struggle as well, I guess.
absolutely. And what's one thing that you've learned about yourself through COVID and this pandemic that you didn't realize about yourself?
Well, I always felt that, when I lived in Somalia and Sudan, Afghanistan, etc., Israel and Palestine, I mean, there were a few security incidents that happened that made me realize that I was quite a resilient person, the way I was able to react to it. In the early days of COVID, I kind of thought, wow, this is actually going to be my biggest challenge, like working from home, being by myself. Right at the beginning, we didn't even know whether, I thought we'd have to just sort of stock up for like a month or more and maybe not leave the house. I mean, I didn't do myself any favors by watching that Hollywood film Contagion, like on the second day of the pandemic. So I was kind of putting myself in that situation. So yeah, I think all of us, right? Everyone, like you, me, and everyone listening, all my friends, I mean, just being very resilient, I think, to get through this thing, and hopefully we're coming out the other side. So I hope, and I think lots of us have learned about how resilient we can be and how little we sort of need, in terms of our daily life. Now, I mean, COVID resulted in hundreds of thousands of job losses, right? So that's appalling. That's tragic for those people. I was lucky enough that I didn't lose my job. And then beyond that, I think it's just like regular exercise, making sure you're talking to people, trying to do 2 or 3 kind things for other people per day, staying grateful for what you have, and yeah, just taking it a day at a time, I think, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And what is there any particular exercise regimen that you subscribe to?
Exercise regimen?
Yeah, like whether it's yoga, walking.
I play a lot of soccer. Like if I could play 7 games of soccer in a week, I would.
Nice.
It's anywhere from, it could be between 2 and 7 games of soccer, and if I don't do that, I'll do different exercises that like kind of like the kind of exercises that footballers do, like plyometric, like with the ladder and stuff, to make myself more flexible and nimble for soccer. So for me, it usually has to involve a ball for it to be interesting for me. Yeah.
Oh, I hear you. And what else would you like to add in regards to the upcoming album Beyond Blue? Is there a release date for the album, or I did see that in the presser? Is there a release date for Beyond Blue?
We're looking at probably mid to late July. We obviously just need a bit of time to get the word out about it. So so far I've released 7 singles: Drifting, Waiting, Beyond Blue, Manhattan View, Walk the Street, Genie, and Skater Park. There's 3 more songs that will be on the album. The next one, which I'll release as a single in May, is called Under a Georgia Sky. It's definitely one of my favorite songs. I think I'm really happy with that one. And then there's a couple more, My Mind is Racing and Ground Mistakes. So yeah, probably mid to end July. And obviously this is the first album from the NOMADIC, so super excited about it. And and to be honest, we'll straight away be working on the follow-up album. So we're just going to try and stay consistent with releasing songs now.
Oh, that's awesome. And can you take us into Under a Georgia Sky, like what the song's about and what people can get out of the message of the song?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I think it's mostly about kind of 2 people really wanting a relationship to work when it might be a bit of a square peg round hole situation. So really trying for something to work, but it not quite working out. And the sort of sentiment being that it's going to be okay in the end, and we'll meet up again under a Georgia sky or anywhere else, and
Nice.
and kind of maybe as friends, or whatever really, but there'll be some kind of sort of reconciliation at the end. So yeah, that's really kind of what it's about, I guess. Yeah.
Awesome. And is there anything else that you would like to add in regards to the Nomadic? We've covered a lot of ground here. Anything else you would like to add?
Yeah, I mean, just to say, you can follow us at the Nomadic Band on social media, and then our YouTube and Spotify is the Nomadic. So definitely follow and subscribe. We've got a ton of stuff coming out, like singles and maybe some covers of other bands. And if you want to write to me and suggest a cover that you think would be good for me to do, happy to give that a shot as well. So follow along, because the next few months and years, I think there's definitely some exciting times coming up for Nomadic.
Yeah, can I suggest a cover?
Sure.
It's by the New Radicals. You Get What You Give.
Oh yeah.
I can see you covering that for some reason.
Yeah, I remember that. That was a big song in the UK. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it was huge. And then I think the front man, if I remember the story correctly, did not want to tour for a living. So that's why New Radicals were kind of a one-hit wonder, because he did not want to leave his family and go on tour. So.
Oh, interesting. I didn't realize that. Yeah.
Yeah, and then they played. Then they reunited just for Joe Biden's inauguration. So.
Oh wow, cool.
And just performed that song, and that was it. So it's kind of funny how they just came back together for that one song.
And it's also kind of amazing that, I don't know who was planning the event, but they were able to remember that song from like 20 years ago, right? And say, this is the song for the inauguration. It's kind of random, right? If you think of all the great songs in the last 20 years or so.
Yeah, exactly. And I want to thank Rob from the Nomadic so much for taking time to interview with us for Madness Creation, and make sure that you practice your self-care and your mental health, and always reach out to us if you ever need anything. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. It's been a pleasure to chat with you. Anytime.